Hi, and welcome to Real Trail Talk. I'm Donovan D'Souza from The Long Ways Better.
And I'm Mark Pybus from The Life of Pi. Welcome to episode 32. We have a very special guest back by popular demand. I think there was an internet campaign to get him back onto Real Trail Talk. Welcome, Ben from Going Solo.
Hello.
So Ben was on the Hike Your Own Hike roundtable that we had, and we brought him back to give a kind of different perspective to what will be a very angry Don episode on the Billman track doing Northcliffe to Walpole.
Yeah, I think I've signposted this is where I'm going to really let loose.
Yeah. So we've liquored Don up a little bit, so his tongue's very loose.
there was a bit of a spill incident.
Yeah, he's tried to spill everything, but we'll get into it, and we'll talk about Northcliffe as a track town. So I think we've already given our opinions on the previous Billman track episode.
Yep.
But Ben, do you want to give us your thoughts on Northcliffe as a track town?
Yeah, it's a nice little town with a pub, but that's essentially it. I think there's a little dam you walk along if you come in from the north. There's a couple of little shops, and there's I think an outdoor art display behind the visitor centre.
Yeah.
Well worth a stay overnight if you're going through there, but I probably wouldn't book a second night.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think that's a very fair rating.
Yeah. So both you guys, am I correct that you did this as a section-to-section hike, Northcliffe to Walpole?
Yeah, I did Northcliffe to Albany, actually.
Cool.
I just did Northcliffe to Walpole. I did that in autumn. When did you do yours?
I did mine around Easter, so spring. No.
Autumn.
He's already got his head
I'm already
in
in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah. So the first day we'll start off Northcliffe to Gardner, and starting off along that railway track that has that famous sign where it points you towards what then would have been Albany. How many X kilometres away?
335. It looked very daunting on day one.
There you go. So what's the walking like on day one, guys?
It's fairly easy. It's quite a flat walk all the way to Gardner Shelter. You do a couple of 100 metres on the old railway track that used to run through town, and then essentially you follow the Gardner River. I think you cross it once, maybe more.
I think maybe twice. I'm not sure. There's definitely once. There's definitely that bridge.
There's quite a few very nice little footbridges, which are great places for rests. Really, really little picturesque spots. You go through some rural properties, some farms, kind of along the edge of those, and then you delve into the Karri Forest. So it was a really pleasant first day's walking after a 4.5 hour drive down from Perth.
I think it was. It was okay.
Here we go.
Part of it is I feel the track alignment here is a bit rubbish. Okay, I will give complete concessions to getting out of town. I think that's fine. You don't have a lot of options. It's going to have to cross roads and things like that. It's going to go through farms. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. But what annoyed me about it was that the Gardner River's just there, but a lot of time is spent not along the Gardner. You're just kind of walking on that four-wheel drive track, which is, I think, a theme for this section. It's not terrible, and especially I was quite open-minded because it was the first day. And also because Gardner campsite had been, completely burnt down, I was accepting of the fact that it looks a bit like it's been burnt down very recently. But I didn't find it, it wouldn't make me want to go, I want to go back to Gardner again. It certainly doesn't fill me with that kind of feeling.
I think we have to preface this episode with the 2015 Northcliffe fires that basically devastated a large part of the state.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be as it was pre-bushfire. So
Yeah.
I think that has a major factor in kind of both of your experiences on this. So, I mean, we'll say that's not the best section, but it is because of natural bushfires.
Well, my thing is the alignment could be better as well. So I will completely give concessions to the fact that there's fires, but there's a lot of if you turn left here, you will get to views of the river. Just make it go along the river, It's just my feeling, because it's just you're just heading along a road. It just feels like very much, and it's the thing that I feel a lot about this section of the track, that you're going from nice to outstanding campsites with quite boring walking in between.
But there are patches of beauty, particularly where you intersect the river here and there. It's like a nice little reward every hour or so when you come across it.
Yeah.
I can see where you're coming from, but I quite liked. I don't hate 4-wheel drive tracks because they're very easy walking and you get to look up, which is something you often don't get to do on a just a foot trail. And I did a little bit of it kind of on the river where we went down and just splashed through the water for 100 meters or something. That was fun.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen someone post a photo before, and it must have been south of Northcliffe, of a boarding house bridge style bridge. Did you guys see that when you were on the Bibbulmun? Or is that not located on the Bibbulmun?
There's like a little there's like from the hut there's like a little area you can go explore the river, and there's like a log across, but it's not a bridge in the sense
it's really just a fallen log. It's not engineered in the way that the boarding house bridge is.
Okay, I might have to go back and try to find that, because he was adamant that it was around Northcliffe, but it looked exactly like boarding house bridge.
I think he's mistaken.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. So you mentioned there's Carry Forest in there, so it can't be too bad of a day of walking. No, Don?
It's okay. It's very burnt, Carry Forest. It will recover. I think Carry, unlike Jarrow, recovers much nicer. And I would say this is an acceptable day of walking.
It's not the most impressive patch of Carry Forest along the track by a long way.
Okay. But the campsite at Gardner is quite nice, and it was your first coming across the rammed earth style huts, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. I think that was the first rammed earth hut that I stayed at, and it's good. You know, some people don't like them. I think that there's a bit of conservatism in there as well as and personal taste, but I don't have a problem with them. How about yourself, Ben?
I understand the necessity of the design. I agree they don't really have the character of the timber huts, but maybe once we have some 20 or 30-year-old rammed earth huts, they will. But any hut with running water next to it is a nice hut, and Gardner's no exception.
Yeah. And I guess the test of the rammed earth style will be when a bushfire comes through, and it will, answer that question: are they going to stand up to a fire, and will they be easily rebuilt? Whether you just put a new roof on and that's it, a new tank. But yeah, I definitely agree that they don't have the character of the older wooden style ones. But I definitely think, because this one is a Nornalup style shelter, they are suited to the Nornalup style. Do you guys agree?
I think it would be nice to see one as a deep south. I'd love to see a deep south.
I agree. Is that the one with bunks?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Because I think that would actually be nice. I think it would look cool, but yet to be seen, because we've never seen one yet.
Yeah, I really don't like the windows that they put in the rammed earth shelters. It's almost like they're only 2-sided shelters, unlike 3-sided shelters. And so if it's blowing a gale, it really gets deep in there and you can't escape it. Whereas in the 3-sided shelters, the wooden ones, as long as the wind isn't coming straight into the hut, which it rarely is because they're oriented away from the prevailing winds, then you're not too bad. But you kind of can't escape it in a lot of the rammed earth ones.
Yeah, and because the Nornalup ones have like half walls on the other side, so you're always getting, like basically the equivalent of 3 walls, because you get half a wall on the other 2 sides. Whereas this, as you say, you're quite right, it is like a window, and it's much more open.
So that's a kind of a yay kind of... Yeah.
Wait and see.
Yeah, a walk out of town kind of day. So move on to day 2, and the finish of the day is quite good, but to get there is kind of... Okay. More of the okay.
Would you...
No, I disagree.
You like it?
It's your introduction to the Pingarup Plains. It's a very different environment to the Carry Forest or the Jarrah Forest that you would have come from if you've come from Perth. It's much more wide open territory with big sky and swamp bottle brush everywhere. Low lying, it'll be inundated in winter and spring. Kind of sandy soil but still firm, so it's easy to walk on, and you kind of drift through these big open plains with kind of patches of Carry Forest here and there, which are like islands because they're usually a little hill where it's slightly higher ground where the Carry grow, which is normally where you stop for a break. And you can usually move quite quickly through those sections because the ground is so flat and forgiving.
So I think this was the first multi-day walk I'd done after the overland track. So that really clouded my view of this section, because I looked at it and I was like, so a friend of ours, Didier, he said, oh, the Pilbara Plains are beautiful, you'll love it. And I got there and I was so disappointed, because I just found them really, compared to Button Grass Plains, I found it really boring. I mean, I liked the Bottle Brush, and I think that this is probably the only section of the track that I think is better to walk in autumn because of the Bottle Brush. Like, it's quite spectacular to see, but there's just so much of the same. Like, I felt it becomes very repetitive, and I didn't enjoy it because I found it very much the same the whole way through. And a lot of it is on the same road that you're on. So basically, once you leave the farmland on the first day, you're following this four-wheel drive track for the whole time. And I guess part of this is the philosophy and the judgment of a good track. Because I think we probably have a difference of opinion on that. Would you say? Like,
that's why we brought Ben in.
I think so.
Yeah, because I for me, it's all about, like, as we'll talk about in the next podcast when we talk about Frenchman's Cap, there were 2 days that were basically, to me, 5-star days, and there's very few 5-star days for me on the Bibbulmun, because there's a lot of compromise. There's a lot of days that are more about getting, like, this section to me really annoys me, because it's very much I'm getting from point A to point B to get to outstanding campsites, but the walking itself isn't as good as the campsites.
I think that's maybe part of a reality of walking a much longer trail.
Yeah.
If you're going to try and engineer a 1,000-kilometre trail, you're going to have to make more compromises than a 70-kilometre trail or something like that.
And that's something that I realized about myself. Like, walking this track, I was like, no, you're not that person who enjoys the really long track, because you'd rather have an uncompromised trail than something that's compromised.
You just want to go straight to dessert.
No, I want the meat. That's what I want.
What he's saying is he wants to move to Tassie.
No, but I mean, the thing is, you're quite right. Like, if you think about the tracks that are famous for being outstanding scenery, they're probably a week or less, right? But the long tracks are much longer, and there's always going to be compromise days that you're going to have to kind of take into account.
I compare it to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You know, it's like 12 hours long. There's a lot of really slow, boring bits. But then you get to the cool battle scenes and it's all worth it. And if you didn't have all that build-up, it wouldn't be quite the same.
That's actually a very good way of putting it. Because, yeah, I mean, as you say, there are some amazing campsites on this section. But to get there, there is the compromise.
Yeah. I mean, I think the comparison I'd make with Frenchman's Cap, which we'll talk about in 2 weeks' time, is that it was hard going to get from hut to hut, but the scenery was outstanding, and that made it worth the effort beyond the fact of the destination. I think, for me, I'm very much about the journey, not the destination, and I found that this walk was about the destination less than the journey.
Well, it's a mentality thing. It depends whether or not you can, you're comfortable putting up with some, quote-unquote boring sections. I don't mind them. I just put in the earphones and chug along, and I quite like the, not having to think for a while. That's what I like about forward drive tracks, is just getting to plow along and not worry about whether you're stepping on something, whether you're going to trip over, and then you get that change, and I like that variety, I guess, in terms of terrain and interestingness. You need the peaks and valleys, personally, but
I think that's key to whether you agree with me or Ben with this section, is that, as we talked about in the Hike Your Own Hike roundtable, is that, I'm like chasing the dragon for quality scenery, but then you're going to do the PCT, like you like these long tracks.
That's true. There's a lot of road sections on the PCT.
Yeah.
But there's also some of the most beautiful landscapes in America, so it's, you got to earn it. That's what I like about it. Maybe I see it as like a personal challenge. You got to earn these beautiful views and these beautiful campsites, and that makes them all the more rewarding.
Yeah.
But maybe you just have to be a bit of a masochist like me to enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on this one, Ben. Like, you can't have it 10 out of 10 the whole way. Like, you have to have some sections where you battle, and I think this is probably one of them. But there's a bit of a question for you here, Don. What were you expecting going into this section? Because that's probably key to why you're feeling this way.
So a lot of people said to me this was their favourite section of the whole track. And I looked at it and I went, are you serious? Are you serious? Because, to me, if I want to talk about sections of the track that I actually think are outstanding, Walpole to Denmark is outstanding. Bailing up to Pemberton, I think, is outstanding. Like, I think you could hold that up I personally feel walking through the Karri Forest through that section, or doing the very varied Walpole to Denmark section, that holds up really well against other tracks in other states as a 7-day hike or 8-day hike. Whereas this just did not hold up to me, especially I think coming after the Overland, where it, as you were saying about like, can you have 100% all the time? No, you can't get 100% all the time, but you can get, you can get 80% all the time on the Overland. And this was, there were days that I would say were like 20%.
I mean, you quoted in your blog post that the Bibbulmun track actually describes this as one of the like wilderness experiences on the track.
Yeah, and it's not.
It's not, yeah.
Like when you... So I say the difference is when you climb Cradle and you look around, you don't see a world beyond Cradle. Yes, you see the Overland track. Yes, you see the huts. But you only see a world that is National Park. Just like when you're in Fitzgerald River, you just see National Park. This, you're constantly seeing reminders that this is not a wild place. You're seeing, they say, oh, this is the most remote and wilderness section. You're on roads most of the time. That's why you don't see any other roads, because you're on a road the whole time.
We'll calm Don down a bit and we'll get to Lake Marringup. One of the most beautiful campsites on the track, according to most people. How did you guys find your stay there?
The approach is beautiful. So you do, is it 16 Ks or something like that from the previous shelter? And the last 2 Ks is really nice. You come out of the plains and you come into these groves of enormous karri trees. Then you go up a little hill and you get and you see the lake. And then you go down it a bit more and you get to the shelter, which is on a 4-wheel drive track, which is covered in bark and stuff, and surrounded by these enormous trees. And the lake is right there, and you can go down and have a dip in it, which we did. But it was very silty when we were in there, and I'm told there were leeches in there as well. But we were a bit gross, so we wanted to do it anyway. Yeah, but beautiful shelter. Definitely recommend it.
Yeah, I think it would be easily top 5 campsite on the Bibbulmun. Would you agree, Ben?
Yeah, I would.
It's just so beautiful, and that to me it's one of those things that made me go, okay, well, I haven't enjoyed the walking, but I'll give you this. This campsite is amazing. It is just so beautiful in that forest. And like one of our friends, Didier, he stayed 2 nights there, and I can see why. Like it's just one of those places that, like as I always often say, like the long way is better, is that this is a place you can only get to on foot, and it is one of those places that is great to discover as you're hiking. And I think coming from being quite bored with the walking, and then as you say, like that lead in is just, you start seeing the karri trees, and it starts, surrounding you with this grandeur. And we saw emus as we were walking in, so it was actually quite an eventful walk into the campsite. And then where it's located, you couldn't have picked a better place, I reckon.
Yeah, totally. It's just a beautiful spot.
Yeah, and one thing the Bibbulmun Track Foundation doesn't tell you about is the pig hunting hut that is located nearby.
Yes,
on
the other side of the lake.
Yeah. Was it you that had the interesting story about that, or was
no? I read it.
Else?
I read it in the book.
That's right, yeah.
That they found like a pig's head just sawed off and left by the trail junction, and just blood everywhere. And then they walked to that hut, and people like had chainsaws and were cutting down the trees around there to make a bonfire.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
It's pig hunters for you.
I'd say the problem I have with the Bibbulmun track in this section is that I think that the Bibbulmun is probably at its best in springtime for most of its length. But this section is the bit where you often get a diversion because it gets flooded. And that to me is a big problem. I think it's something that they need to find a more permanent solution for it, because to do this section and miss out on seeing Lake Marringup, I think it would be a real letdown. The track goes to places like the Valley of the Giants, or it goes to the Gloucester Tree, but this particular place is something that no one really knows about. I didn't really know about it before getting there, and it's just as spectacular, but you don't get to go there in springtime. It just is closed. And that to me is a terrible outcome for the track if you're walking it at that time of year.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to do it in autumn, so didn't have that issue, but it would be a big problem if that were the case.
And precisely why I've booked this in for early June, just so I don't get all those diversions. But I mean, especially the last 2 to 3 years, we've had really wet winters and wet springs. Certainly is a bit of a downer if you're coming from overseas or over east and you're doing this track wanting to experience it in full.
Yeah.
And this area is quite susceptible to diversions.
Yeah.
Especially spring/summer this year, where they put in, what was it, a 60 odd kilometre diversion through because of bushfires or prescribed bans. So, I mean, it is an issue, but again, it's a free track. We don't have the resources to put in a permanent solution right now.
Yep.
So I think we'll probably wait till the end of the podcast to discuss how this area could be improved.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to day 3. Don, I know you woke up to a lovely sunrise. Ben, how was your waking up on the morning of day 3?
Yeah, the same. It was just beautiful. I think Bonnie and I walked down to the lake's edge just to watch the sun come up. Maybe Bonnie did and I was lazy. I can't remember. But anyway, it was still very pretty regardless of what happened. And it's just the Karri Forest is beautiful in the morning, a bit misty. Kind of the canopy is just getting dappled with the golden sunlight. It's really, really nice.
I mean, we talked about the great campsites, but the day walking here, not super fantastic.
It starts
at least
out
for Don.
okay. It starts out okay.
Yeah.
Like, I really like the Karri Forest bits.
It's funny because there's a bit where you follow a forward drive track for a bit, but it's really dense. It's surrounded on both sides by really high vegetation, so it does feel a bit wild. But then there's these duck boards, which I don't understand, which are like, they'll traverse a bit, you know, and then there'll be another 500 meters of nothing, and then there'll be like a duck board for 100 meters. And I'm like, if this area is inundated, like, what is the point in being dry for 100 meters when you're just going to be... There is no way you're escaping that water.
Shake your boots out.
Yeah. But they make... In autumn, they made for a great space to stop and have a break because you can use them as a seat.
Yeah, that's a good idea, yeah.
Not really what they're intended for, but whatever.
I think to start with, it's good because you get a good mix on this day. You get Karri Forest and then you get Pingarup Plains, sort of, that grasses with the swamp bottle brush. And you're quite right, like it doesn't make any sense that there's boardwalk for a little bit and then there's a knot, because you're pretty much going to be walking through, because you can see the mud. Like, it's got boot prints still from the spring before. So this area would get flooded, but there's just bits of boardwalk, and you just think, well, why bother? Why not just do the whole thing? Because...
I do wonder what those poor trail maintenance volunteers thought they were achieving when they put that in.
Yeah,
I'm sorry if they're listening to this and they're like, oh.
You actually, I think you have to provide a little hope every now and then. And it's just that 100 meters of, this is okay. And then you get straight back into it.
Yeah.
Yep. For 100 meters, I'm not going to have trench foot.
Yeah. I think John Chapman, because he walked this when it just opened, and he said, and this is a guy who was hardcore, he said that like 2.5 Ks straight of walking through flooded sections is too much.
Well, because people talk about 2 to 3 days of walking through this section flooded is a life-changing experience.
So like walking with Wyatt, quite a famous hiker, she did this section, and she got to a point where she just went, this is terrible. And she did the diversion around from Lake Maringup. So, and was walking along roads that were flooded, and just said, like, I've reached my like wit's end with this stuff. It's just too much.
Yeah, I understand. And we're coming up to the Pingarup Plains, which everyone who's ever researched or done the Billman always thinks of flooding. I mean, you guys got to experience them when they were dry. Is it a lot better than what people describe? Or is it just kind of flat, what would you call it, flooded vegetation, just acceptable?
Well, yeah, it is very flat. You can see a really long way, which is kind of rare on the track. You can see where you're going to be in 15 minutes. and you get a weird sense of how fast you're moving as a human being, because there's these little islands of Jarrah and stuff, and you see them moving through your field of vision as you follow the track along, which is something you're not used to. If you come from either direction, you probably wouldn't have seen it before. It's like you almost sense the earth turning underneath your feet as you're going through it, which is something I found really cool. And it's it's very exposed. It's often very overgrown because the flora on the plains is very fast growing and very prickly, and it often overwhelms the track. But you just charge through it, and it's I met a hiker at Dogpool who had come the other direction, who'd just been through a whole day of bashing through that stuff, and she absolutely hated it and was miserable. But I think it's about partly mentality, but also just how lucky you are and how well you're doing on your hike. She was covered in blisters and was in pain, and that probably changed her outlook on it a bit. Whereas I was only 3 days in, feeling very fresh, very happy with how I was going. Was managing my knee problems pretty well. And was just enjoying myself. So it's really depends on your outlook.
I think the weather plays a big part. So when we were there, for this section, it was sunny, and I hated it because it's just open and boring looking, and it's just, I think less so on this day, but later on, probably the next few days when you get to Pingarup Plains, they do seem endless. But on this day, it's just really pockets between the forest, and there's a lot more forest on this day than it does get later on. And also there were things where it looked like exciting things were in this direction, to the right of the track or to the left of the track at certain points. I remember there was a bit where there was these granite domes, and I thought, oh, that would be awesome, I think we're going to go there. No, we're not. We're just going to go through this burnt Jarrah forest instead. And that really bothered me, because it felt like I was just in Kalamunda again rather than in something different and new. Because, when people talk about this section as being quite unique and different, what people forget is that there's a lot of Jarrah here. And if you're not a fan of Jarrah walking, you're not going to like the Jarrah here.
Are you a fan of Jarrah walking, Donovan? I'm not sure.
I'm not a fan of Jarrah walking.
Oh, no way.
I don't think we've ever covered this before.
Wow.
Yes.
Please tell us more.
I've never mentioned this before. Yeah, so because the Jarrah in the Pingarup Plains is really stunted looking. It doesn't really... It looks like the stuff near Collie. It doesn't look like the Jarrah that you get in the hills, where maybe it's a bit bigger. Like, you're not going to find Dwelling Up style Jarrah, or the Jarrah that's near Swamp Oak, or in the transitional forest between Bailing Up and Donnelly River. You're going to get that really stunted, ugly, sandy soil Jarrah. So I was really frustrated through a lot of that.
But
we should request the BDF to plant some nicer Jarrah there.
Yeah, like transplant all the sandy soil and just get some nice loomy clay soil where it can grow like nice and tall and provide Don with shade.
Exactly. Yeah. Is that so much to ask?
Yeah, that won't cost anything at all. Actually, let's ask the Forest Products Commission to get in there and do that for you. Oh, because they love planting trees.
They do.
Yeah, straight after clearing them. But the area, like the national park that you do walk through, which I'll ask you to pronounce, Don, because I can't.
Don Tregasto.
That one. It is known to be quite wild, and like you're up the top of Mount Chullup and you can see the islands of forest. Surely that would be more interesting to walk through. No?
It's okay.
Like, do you not get that sense of like wilderness?
Because you see roads so much. There's so much roads. It's just, that's the thing, is because, see, the problem with WA is that because it's flat, you can build roads easily. Whereas in Tassie, they just wouldn't build a road because it's too hard. So you see roads all the time, and that bothered me a lot. And this section isn't so bad, but towards the end of the section, you start entering what I consider the nadir of the Bibbulmun track when you join Dogpool Road. And it's just roads for like 20 Ks.
Oh, that was my favourite.
What podcast were you listening to?
No.
So you mentioned Dogpool Road, which is kind of the lead into the Dogpool campsite. I guess you could compare it to when you get to just before Tom Road, and you just think we're almost there, but then
Yeah,
you've
it's a bit
got
like that.
a lot
It's
of
actually
road
quite
walking
long.
to go
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
So not the favourite for both of you, I'm guessing.
Well, you feel like you're moving slower because when you're on a wider road, you feel like you're moving slower because the things tend to move slower in your field of vision. When you're on a narrow track, it feels like you're blitzing through
Yeah.
it.
And
Uh,
unfortunately, the track is burnt. You know, like as you say, the Northcliffe fires just ruined this area. And like, there's a lot of people who say Dogpool was one of their favorite campsites on the track, and it's just not as beautiful as it used to be. Tom Road, long walk along a road that, you know, Dogpool is quite nice. You do feel like, oh, when are we going to get there? But it's nice Karri Forest, but this is just burnt Karri Forest.
That's what you save your best playlists for.
See, I don't have playlists
Yeah,
because
you
I
gotta
just
have
want to
them.
I want to experience
No,
it
you
like
should.
unfiltered.
You need like
You want to experience that unfiltered, having just trash talked it.
yeah.
Well, no, I like to experience all hikes unfiltered,
Okay.
and so like these boring parts, I think are probably more accentuated as a result.
Yeah.
I
This
don't
is
think
where
you
you're
lose
going
anything
wrong.
from the experience by, rocking some tunes for that section.
Yeah.
I think we played. I just had my phone on in my pocket and I put on some terrible 80s music. I think it was Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler. And Bonnie and I were just walking along, just rocking out, just singing along, and it's just like a long road trip. You
Yeah.
just gotta. That's the time to break out
Exactly.
the M&Ms and the music.
The Eminem music or the M&Ms?
No, M&Ms and the music. Well, the M&M music. I like M&M.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. I think this is where you're going wrong in your hiking, Don. You need more music in there.
But I like to just be in the present.
No. Yeah, but you
And-
can do that and play some Lord of the Rings symphony, and then it just makes everything more grander.
But I want to experience it, I don't know, like uninfluenced by other things. And there's been times when I've done walks where I've just gone, that's amazing. But like, I think, like you're right, if you put on headphones, you maybe will enjoy these boring parts more. But you don't know that they're boring as they are because you've got something else to distract you. Whereas I'd like to know that it's boring because I have a baseline and I can see, I've been to places where it is not boring for 20Ks. Wow. And this just is boring.
We're getting a real insight into the mind of Donovan
Yeah.
D'Souza.
But it's actually good because then Don goes and writes all of his blog posts,
Yeah.
and we know which sections are the boring ones, so we put in
Oh.
our headphones.
Mark, you are going to absolutely love this section, having had Donovan just
I know.
drive your expectations through the floor. There's no way you can underestimate it. You just be like,
Exactly.
oh, this is okay.
I'll just do Dogpool Road and be like, cool, podcast in, music in,
Yeah.
get
But-
into the campsites.
But I will say, Dogpool Campsite, again, nice campsite.
Nice campsite. Also rammed earth, also burnt down. Kind of overcleared around it, which is a criticism of all the rammed earth shelters.
Yep.
But nice little brook running through there, which I'm told is a raging torrent in winter.
Yep.
It was a bit of a stagnant pool when we were there, but I got half in, Bonnie got all the way in. Yeah, really nice spot.
We had cascades, we washed off, it was nice, like it's nice to get clean on
It
a
is.
hike.
Any campsite with running water is a good campsite.
Agree.
And am I correct in saying this is the campsite where they have the bridge that everyone really hates?
Yeah, it's a big engineered steel bridge with no character whatsoever. But
That's a fair.
that's what you got to
appraisal.
do. If it's a long span,
Yeah.
I can see why a nice rustic timber bridge would just be impractical.
But it does have probably the most deluxe toilet. Like, I remember people saying, why is there a wheelchair accessible toilet
Yeah.
on the track?
Brookton's got a wheelchair accessible toilet, but that hut is wheelchair accessible.
This is not.
Yeah, it's
Possum Springs has it too. Like I walked into it, I was like, why is there a handrail? Who's going to
Yeah.
come here that needs
I think
a handrail?
it's a government, like,
God.
requirement.
if there's a bad enough storm, you'd be better off just sleeping in that thing
Yeah.
because it's got 4 walls.
It's massive.
Yeah,
And
I'm not kidding.
And it's like the most deluxe. You compare it to the normal toilets in the track, and it's so deluxe. It doesn't need to be, but they must have like some rule where it must be DDA compliant.
No, I actually think they're better for the track, especially if you get to a hut or a campsite where it's really crowded and you need just a place to change or do something like that, and you don't want to do it in a tent or in your sleeping bag or something. I enjoy it for that quality, but yeah, they're definitely over-engineered in that sense.
You walk into the toilet and there's a man with a bow tie going, "Hello, we have a seat right here for you."
I'll grab a warm towel for you, sir. It's
Mint?
like a mint. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dogpool, we've kind of agreed. Good campsite.
Yeah.
Yep, great
Yeah.
campsite.
There's no
Alright.
bad campsites in this section, really.
No, they're all good. Yeah.
I mean, I think Woolbells is the least good, and it's still okay.
What?
It's
Oh,
still
maybe
good.
the hut itself. Anyway, we'll get to that. Let's
Yeah.
wait till
Yeah,
we
yeah.
get to that.
Okay, so we'll go the next day. Dogpool to Mount Chance. Don, you've got one word. Go.
Nadir.
Okay, Ben will allow you some more time. What do you think about this section?
Dog Quarter Mount Chance. Yeah, it's not the best. The first, what is it, nearly 10 Ks is all wide road.
Yeah. Marin Road, the worst bit of the whole Bibbulmun track.
Dun, dun,
Which,
dun, dun.
but the Bibbulmun track actually acknowledged this in the workshop that we went to.
Probably because I emailed them and said how much I hated it.
Yeah.
I think it says in the book that it's not that great, but it is what it is.
No, I think the book actually tries to sell it as one of the flat sections. You know, like,
Well, it is.
it is.
It's very exposed. I would hate to do it on a really stinking hot day because there's no shade. But again, earphones in, power on.
Yeah. I mean, Don, you have specific criticisms about this road because there are sections on the map that you can see next to the road that may be more interesting.
Yeah, so like as a cruel twist of fate, there are rapids on the Gardiner River just nearby the track. Like if you walked a K off the track, you would see rapids. Instead, you have to walk through stunted Jarrah Forest for a very long time. Yes, there's some nice carry on there, but there's just so much that could be done here. And you just spend so long on it. And I saw like a post from a Victorian who came over and like they got to Woolbells and they said, I really don't like the Bibbulmun track because of how much of this is on roads. And it just seems so much of it was done for expedience sake rather than thinking about the experience. So the walking along Marin Road is, to me, like the least good. So I'll put it this way. I hated it so much that, when the Bibbulmun track refers to itself as a world-class walk, I was like, no. Like, this to me is not world-class. This is terrible. This is like no better than like some of the walks shy of Kalamundaput where they just put some signs up on a management track and say it's a trail. This is not world class, but it has the potential to be world class, and there's just so much that could be done here to make it a better experience for hikers so that it could be world class, but it's not right now. And to say that it's world class is a lie.
Yeah. So
Outright lie.
So we're not being too negative on this podcast. Where would the improvements come that would be practical to do?
A realignment through here so you're not spending the whole time on a road.
Okay.
It's unacceptable that you spend this much time on a road. Unacceptable because if you're telling people that this is a great track and you tell people that Western Australia is really good to visit in the springtime, and it is. I love when you drive through Perth and you see the wildflowers. You go like, why did they plant these ugly plants the rest of the year? And you see it, and it's just like, it is stunning to drive down the freeway. This is an area that could be stunning, and the whole track is stunning up to this point. Even like the boring Jarrah Forest is nice at this time of year, comparable to the rest of the year.
Okay.
Think about it. Like we were talking about Preston National Park. It's a nice to see all the wildflowers there. I think it would be boring in autumn. But this section here... Okay. This section here, though, is the only bit of the track that is problematic in springtime because it's flooded. And then once you deal with all these, if you've been diverted around onto roads because of Lake Maringup, you now have even more roads to walk on. And that to me is unacceptable
On the road
for a supposedly world-class track. So, there's the fact that there's rapids along the track tells me that there's so much more to see here, and that this was done for expedience sake, not for the walker's experience.
I think we need to get Donovan some blinders just so he can't see what he's missing. Just Just eyes down, Donovan.
Yeah. All right. Well, to counter that, Ben, did you find it as terrible as Don did? And do you see a solution around this problem?
In defense of that road section, it is well graded. It has adequate drainage. It's a relatively straight line from where you are to where you need to be. Look, it's not great. But I knew it wasn't going to be great reading it. I knew it in the book. It said, here's 8Ks of walking along a road. I was expecting very little, and my expectations were met.
But that's 8Ks walking on the road, then you turn left and continue walking along the road.
Yeah, but then the road gets a bit more interesting, doesn't it?
It does get better.
Yeah, because then it goes up a bit. If I remember correctly, you go past some little dams with some suspect water supply. And then eventually on the way to... Where are we ending up today? Mount Chance?
Yeah.
Then you do eventually return to the plains and onto a pedestrian track.
And that's where it gets good.
Yeah, it does get good there.
Yeah.
Yep. The approach to Mount Chance shelter is nice. All that bit through the plains is great. Very overgrown when we did it. You had to charge through foliage, but that was still kind of fun in a way.
Yeah, I'm fine with overgrown track.
Yep.
But make it walking track and make it interesting. And this was interesting because I like that you got to these islands of forest, and then every now and then in these islands of forest, just where there's enough water, there's maybe 1 or 2 carries.
Yeah.
And that's really cool.
What I like about the road section is, if you
like something about the
yeah,
road
there are pros. There aren't many, but there are pros.
Well drained.
If you wanna bash out 6Ks an hour, you can do it. It's not that hard.
Yeah, so we did push through this, but I don't care about that.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I know you do because you're a long distance guy.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it must be said that this is one of the longer days if you double into Walpole. This is 25 Ks of hiking, so you do need some sections where you can bash out 6Ks an hour.
Yeah, and this day was even a bit harder for us because A, it was quite warm, and B, we had heard rumours that the Mount Chance shelter was out of water, which turned out not to be true. The tap was just a bit dodgy. But as a consequence, we lugged like 4 litres of water on top of our regular daily water. So I think we were each carrying like 6 litres for that whole day, which made it quite heavy. And then we got to Mount Chance and realised that the tank was actually fine. You just had to fiddle with the tap a bit.
So Ben had a tougher day than Donovan.
Oh no, it was hot. It was hot and uncomfortable that day, which added to my hatred for this section.
Wow. I'd have loved to actually seen you on this day.
Yeah.
Just walking along with like...
And I mean, you come from the overland track and you do this and you just go like, not world class.
I mean, not having the map in front of us as we're talking, would you be able to divert the track on Boardwalk, because this will then become flooded in winter and spring, at a sufficient distance between Dogpool and Mount Chance?
So the thing is, if you, instead of crossing the bridge, if you follow the river, you come to the rapids, and then I don't mind if you join the road at where it turns off Marin Road. A little bit of road walking. I understand that there's no choice sometimes. But if you make people walk on road this long, my question is then what's the difference between doing this and then just walking on a road in the city? Yes, maybe there's more forest, but the forest isn't that exciting, so what does it matter? It's just... there's just so much more that could be done here to make it more of a wilderness experience. Especially when you say, oh, this is the wildest section of the track, it's the most isolated. No, but if you're walking on roads the whole time, that's not isolated. That's just not good enough, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Then I guess we get to the hut.
Yeah, so Mount Chance, you're kind of getting to these big granite domes that this section is now famous for. The campsites are probably some of the best along the track. Would you guys agree that this is one of the better nights in this section?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Definitely my top 5. contender for number one, maybe even.
Oh, really?
I really
would
like
say, I would say top 5 for sure.
Yeah. I just really like the granite dome. It's a really easy scramble up to the top, and you have this amazing view over the plains, which is just stunning at sunset and sunrise, which is when you're going to see it if you're hiking. And in the morning we went up, we saw the mist all over the plains. You could see all the plain sections because they're just covered in fog. You can see where you've come from. You can see just an incredibly long way. I think we could see Broke Inlet just, and it's just spectacular. And you watch a good sunset up there. You see the golden light hit the karri trees. It is one of my highlights of that whole Northcliffe to Albany section that I did was there. And also Woolbales the next night, which was very similar. It's just great. Love it.
Yeah. I think that this is, after hating the day, I thought, thank goodness that this campsite is amazing. And the view from there, like, it was so good. Like, as you say, like, I climbed it in the evening. I climbed it in the morning because it's that good. You know, like, I think as far as campsites go, there's very few that are as good as Mount Chance.
And the top of Mount Chance has reception for anyone who's planning, communicating, organising drop-offs or whatever.
And as you say, like, look, the view out to the plains is like an African savanna. You know, like, you can just see forever. And because of all the grasses, it's just this open landscape, and it's astoundingly beautiful. So, like, I'll say I hated the day, but the campsite is amazing.
We have Happy Don back. And just for the people that haven't done this section, i.e. probably me, how far away is the top of Mount Chance from the actual campsite?
Oh, almost no distance, a couple 100 metres.
Yep.
You walk out of the hut, and within 20 metres you're already walking up the granite dome, and then it's 2 minutes scramble to the top.
Yeah.
There's no trouble at all. I went up and down several times over the course of the first evening we were there. That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, fingers crossed they get good weather in June, but you never know.
Yeah. But we had, like, a really interesting experience that night because we had, like, a possum just, like, scurrying around.
Yeah.
And it was just horrifying. So we had, like, there was an American lady who's a through hiking veteran. She did the AT, and she came to do this. And this scream happened in the middle of the night. She's like, "Is that a rattlesnake?" And it sounded like either... Like, what we decided was either an emu that was, like, around and it was just walking around, or it was a possum that was just, like... Because we heard this, like, scratch on the wall. And it just sounded horrifying. And Alyssa's like, "Go check it out." I'm like, "No, I'm not going to go check that out."
You go check it out.
Yeah.
Got some really nice tent sites.
Oh, it does, yeah.
That's what I stayed in my tent that night. There's a little loop, which is kind of ensconced in this grove of karri and other trees and stuff. Really nice.
Definitely.
All right, and we move on to... I've got a tick on my little sheet here for this day because it's a Happy Don day.
It is.
It's the kind of the full-on Pinjarra Plains experience on this day.
Yeah.
And I know, Don, you got some better weather.
Because it was worse.
Because it wasn't super sunny, let's put it that way.
It was really cloudy and rainy. And as a result, I think we got to see the plains at their best. So there's a photo I took of the plains as we left Mount Chance that is one of my favorite photos of the Bibbulmun. Ironically, because I hate this section. And it was just like, I went, "Oh, I get it. I get why the Pinjarra Plains are beautiful. I finally see some beauty in this horrible place." Because we had this cloud and just this nice light, and it just looks really lovely. And then further along the track, because it had rained, there's just all these spiders in the plains. And you don't see them normally because they're not wet, but because of all the rain, all the spider webs were visible. And they're all these kind of orb weaver spiders. And as a result, I actually thought this section was really beautiful because of it. Because as far as you could see, there were all these spiders. And that doesn't sound really great.
No, I understand, because you
But
see
it
those
was.
like when places get flooded and the spiders like migrate to the trees and then they just become giant webs. Yeah, I can picture that.
Yeah, and just all the dew. It was just marvelous. And I went, I now see some beauty to this section that I've so far hated.
And you do 8k more of plain, which is all on walking track,
Hmm.
or almost all. And then you get to the road that leads up to the top of Mount Pingarup, which is a short diversion that is definitely worth it. I went up there and had
Yeah, worth the side trip.
a morning break, kind of similar to the top of Mount Chance, except a bit higher, and just another stunning view. Good place for a break, and you'd really be silly to walk that section and not take that little diversion.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing, that there's more of these side trips are good, because as we've talked about, the one that's near Monadnock is not marked.
Mount Randall.
Yeah, like, I feel like it's a track that should be marked so people have the option to do it, and it's great that in this section that there are these side trips like Mount Pingarup.
So the walking from Mount Pingarup onto Woolbales, what's that like for the rest of the day?
It's kind of nondescript forest. Nothing really that jumps out of my memory. Just probably more stunted jarrah, which we know Donovan's not a fan of.
Nope. but look, I'll say I was in good spirits
Yeah.
because the morning was so good. I was like, okay, it's fine. It's not. I don't love it, but I'll forgive it.
Was
And
it,
it's good to have shade.
Yeah.
Was it burnt though?
Yes.
It was. It was burnt stunted jarrah, like the worst of jarrah for Donovan.
When I walked
Yes.
through it, there was this bizarre, really, really short section, maybe only like 300 meters, where everything was blown over like there'd been a big storm, but just incredibly localized. I couldn't work out what was going there. Like, was it a UFO landing or something?
Meteorite or something.
I don't know. Anyway,
Interesting.
and then there's a wooden footbridge, and then a bit more kind of plainy / jarrah. Can't really decide what it is section, and then you end up at Woolbale Shelter.
Yep.
Another great shelter.
Yes.
Not for the shelter itself, but for Woolbales, which is the Woolbales Hills, but specifically the granite dome right behind the shelter, which is along the similar lines to Mount Chance. It just offers stunning views. Is really, really short walk from the campsite.
Phone reception as well.
Phone reception as well, although not as reliable as Mount Chance. Great views of the inlet. You can see 360 degrees, so sunrise, sunset is all just gorgeous there. And we went up at night and saw the stars, and that was probably my highlight of the whole track. Was that one experience, lying on my back on the top of Woolbales, just watching the Milky Way. It was a moonless night. Just it's a spectacular array of stars in the sky. No clouds, just seeing them kind of revolve above you, and that was unbelievable. It was so clear you could even see all the nebula and stuff, and the purpley bits, and all the stuff that you normally only see in really good astro shots.
Nice.
Unbelievable. And I was really I had that same thought that you had, Donovan, when I was up there, which is like, this is a really unique part of Western Australia that very few people get to see, and it's only accessible by this very specific way. And I felt really, really lucky to be there.
Yeah, I had positive feelings about this campsite. I think it's the least spectacular in some ways. The campsite itself, like where the hut is located, is okay, and especially because if you look around the other side of the particular granite dome, there is a Karri forest pocket, and I just kind of wish that they'd move it over there.
I don't know. Maybe there's reasons.
I feel like they wanted it to be different, because otherwise it would be basically Mount Chance Part 2. So because they didn't do that, it would probably
not
make
necessarily
sense.
a bad thing, because Ben, you had that as possibly number 1, and Donovan, you had it top 5. So, I mean,
yeah, but I mean, where the hut is probably located is good to get up to the top, and the view is outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
It is very good, so it is worth it for that. I climbed it twice in the day.
Yeah,
'cause it
I'd say
was
if you're going to
worth
go there at sunset. Definitely be there for sunset.
Yeah.
Go again after dinner when the stars are out, and then wake up early and go there again for the sunrise.
Yeah.
Unforgettable.
noted.
Yeah.
I'm in quite a good position here that I haven't done it, so I can just get all
Yeah.
these tips.
Or you can even camp up there. I think Bonnie was talking about camping up there, but it was kind of too scratchy or something like that. I can't remember. But if you have a good ground sheet or something, you could even just roll out your mat up there. Or if you don't have an inflatable mat, as long as it's not going to rain, it'd be perfect.
Alright, so moving on from wool bales, this is quite a significant day, especially if you're doing a north to south end to end. And Ben, I'm assuming because you're doing Northcliffe to Albany that this was the first time on the Billman that you had seen the coast.
This day was my low point of the entire track, not because of the track, but because of the things that happened to me. I misjudged the sand dunes, and I pushed myself too hard in 29-degree heat, and I ended up giving myself hyponatremia, which is when your blood runs out of salt, basically. Because I'd been replenishing my water because I was very conscious about getting dehydrated in the sun, but I hadn't been replacing my salt diligently enough. And then when I got to Long Point Shelter, I'd planned to double all the way to Mount Clare that day, but I got to Long Point at about lunchtime. I felt okay, but a bit tired, and then started feeling very, very weird, almost hungover. And then I started having like heart palpitations, and I was worried I was having a heart attack. And I was actually quite scared because I was conscious of how far away I was from everyone and from any kind of help.
So Bonnie had left you at this
Yeah,
stage,
she left at Mandalay Beach. But anyway, maybe we should tell it chronologically. But look, don't underestimate sand dunes or salt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first part of the day, getting out of wool bales, how's that?
Missed opportunity. You walk past the wool bales. The track doesn't go over the wool bales. I reckon that this day would be way more interesting if the track actually went over those wool bales. There's a nice bit where you come down, you can see the Brock Inlet, and it's along this granite expanse, but could be better.
So you're comparing it to the old Billman around the Mondanox, where
Exactly.
it went around Mount Vincent, Mount Cuthbert.
Exactly. Like I feel like this is like the opportunity where, you've been on quite flat terrain for a long time. You could have a Mondanox type experience by going over the wool bales. Doesn't happen.
Ben?
Wow. Man, I feel like these would be great Donald Trump quotes you could appropriate and make them Donovan's take on these things. Anyway, it's more Pingerup Plains for a bit. Then you come across Karri Forest, and it's kind of a more substantial, enduring Karri Forest than you've seen before. It's not just little patches, and it's part of the first big landscape transition if you've come from Northcliffe. And then you get to the coast, and you start seeing coastal scrub.
That's very burnt.
Okay. Yates, Bullich, all those kind of things. And you start hitting much more sandy track, which is much more difficult and slower going to walk on.
Yeah.
And you start seeing things like tyres, which they put in there to try and stabilise it. You start seeing things like conveyor belt rubber, which they've just lain over big sections. And personally, I'm not a fan of sand walking, but it's kind of there's a reward in that it's kind of the harbinger of the ocean, and you struggle through these bits, and then eventually you get to a rise where you see the Southern Ocean for the first time on the bib track, which if you've come all the way from Kalamunda would be really momentous.
Yeah.
And even just coming from Northcliffe, it was momentous for us, and it was great. And then you get spit out at Mandalay Beach. So the Mandalay was a Norwegian trading ship which was wrecked on that beach in either the late 1800s or early 1900s, and there's a really interesting story of how the sailors all survived. I think all of them survived, and it made their way back to Norway, and it was quite a remote part of Western Australia at the time. It kind of still is, but even more. And you can read all about it on the plaque, which is a really interesting stop. And then you go down onto the beach, which is very wild and very rough, and then you climb a bunch of sand dunes for hours and hours.
Yeah, I thought that we were almost getting there, but how wrong I was. It was just insane. And there's like that bit I remember, not long after Mandalay, where you have to really run up a dune.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're just going to slide back down.
There's a lot of that. It's another place where trekking poles really help.
Yeah.
You do a bit of extra. You can use a bit of your arm muscles as well as your legs. But it's essentially up and down sand dunes for several hours. Your k's per hour goes through the floor. I tried to stupidly make it up, and I started going. I was really pushing myself to be at least above 4 k's an hour. I was not stopping properly for breaks. I was just having quick chugs of water when I got to the top of sand dunes, And by the time I got to Long Point, which was supposed to be my lunch stop on the way to a double to Mount Clair, I sat down and I was feeling very exhausted, but I didn't think it was anything abnormal initially. And then I sat down in the shelter, enjoyed the shade, and then my heart rate was not slowing, and I was still sweating really profusely, and I was starting to get a headache, and I was still breathing really heavily. And then after like 2 hours, none of this had improved one bit. My heart was still going like, I don't know, 120 beats a minute or something ridiculous like that. And I started to realize something was up. And it was a bit scary because you're a long way from help out there, and even with my PLB, nobody's going to be able to get there in time to save me from a heart attack. And I didn't even have the energy to properly have lunch. I was lucky that there was a packet of shapes in the outside pocket of my bag, which I took out and forced myself to eat because I kind of had an idea of what was up at that point, which was basically that my body had run out of salt, which I'd neglected. I was very conscious about replacing water because I was sweating so much, but I didn't account for all the sodium that you lose when you sweat and all the electrolytes that you lose, which are essential, as I have since discovered, to regulating water intake in cells, because if you don't have enough sodium, the cells swell. And basically you feel like crap and kind of like a really bad hangover. But then I literally just sat on the wooden boards of the shelter for probably 4 or 5 hours until it was nearly sunset. Didn't read, didn't do anything, just sat there. I was feeling that bad. And eventually I got up and I decided, I've got to do something. I can't just sit here forever. So I decided to walk the 1 kilometre spur trail down to Little Long Point, which is something that Bonnie had made me promise that I would do. And I considered reneging because I was feeling so bad, but I decided I needed to do something to test out my body. So I did a very slow walk out there, and it turned out to be absolutely worth it because it's just an incredible spot. One of the great diversions of the Bib. It's a point where there's these big jagged rocks that jut out into the ocean, and they get absolutely pounded by these enormous waves. And I sat there for about an hour and just watched it and took photos and just appreciated just the awe-inspiring power of the ocean there, which really makes you feel puny watching it, which made me feel a lot better. And then I kind of toddled back to the hut, made myself dinner, and went to sleep.
So Don, how was your experience at Long Point?
So mine was probably less scary, but the walk into Long Point, when you get to that junction, it's so long to walk into the hut. It's like more. I think it's more than 500 meters to walk to there.
I have to agree with that. It is ridiculously long. There's something cruel about seeing the little sign with the shelter on it, and then it not appearing for like 10 minutes. You're like, I've been made a promise.
And then, so I decided I was going to do the side trip, but I have the old chunky books, not the new ones, and it just made no mention of how long it was. And it's quite a long walk. As you say, it's a K, so it's 2 Ks there and back. Mm-hmm. And I set off too late, and I didn't realize how long it was going to be. And I was wearing my, very fashionable Keen's campsite shoes. And it just was too far, especially when there were so many new guides on the track. So after I got to a certain point, I just went, you know what, this is not worth it. So I had to double back, which is a shame because, as you say, it's supposed to be a fantastic side trip. But
keep it on your list.
Something I want to go back and do.
Really? Because I thought you'd said that you would never ever do this section again.
I'll put it this way. I think that from Mandalay Beach onwards, it has the character of the Walpole to Denmark section.
Yeah.
So, I feel like it changes from that point on to be, like, the section I love the most.
What are you doing in early June then? You can come join me at Mandalay Beach.
Yeah, maybe, if I have the time. Yeah, I'll do it.
Alright, so we're going to do Long Point straight into Walpole. There is the hut at Mount Clair that you can stay at, but it is about 20 k's into Walpole from Long Point, so it's... ideally you would stay at Mount Clair because it is such a beautiful campsite, but just logistically it doesn't work out to make much sense to stay there after Long Point. So Long Point to Mount Clair, how's the walking there?
Well, I had planned to stay at Mount Clair. I'd planned to double past Long Point, but obviously that didn't happen. So what happened was I woke up at like 2 a.m. having fallen asleep at sunset, which was like 6:30, and I was being dive bombed by a squadron of mosquitoes, and I put some DEET on my forehead, and that didn't stop them, and I was wide awake because I'd gone to sleep so early, and eventually I was just like, stuff it, I may as well do it now. I don't want, after yesterday's experience in the heat, I just wanted to get to Walpole ASAP so that I could have my town day, because I really needed to recuperate and have a shower and go to a chemist and sort myself out. So I packed up at 2 a.m. and started walking. So I did that whole section in the dark. So I probably can't say a lot about the beauty of it. I can say it is actually quite nice in the dark. You get really cool ocean breezes. You have to swat a lot of spider webs off the trail because they all come out at night and cover the track, and the spiders are actually in there at night. Which is, I think I was counting and I lost count at about 50 of the number of ones that I had to. There was no alternative but to tear them down because they were right over the middle of the track. I tried to avoid them where I could, but anyway. And the forest had kind of a spooky dimension to it once I got to the taller trees around the deep river. And I remember getting to like the only structure along that point, which is this weird little shelter, which has like a single bar of, or a single plank of wood to sit on. So it's like 15 centimeters wide, with a roof, which is in the middle of the forest before you get to the Deep River Bridge, and that just looks so creepy at night with no one around. And then I crossed the Deep River Bridge and started ascending Mount Clare, which had a really spooky but atmospheric vibe at like 5 in the morning. And I delayed my arrival into Mount Clare because I didn't want to get there before people woke up, but that turned out to be pointless because nobody was there. And I had a really nice breakfast there and saw the sunrise at that hut, and it is a beautiful shelter. And I wished I had made it there the night before and stayed there, because it would have been a much nicer night than at Long Point. It's near the top of Mount Clare. It's surrounded by very tall trees. It feels very ensconced in the forest. And if you do sleep there, you have the security of knowing that the next morning it's all downhill into Walpole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about that campsite is the tingle trees nearby.
Oh, yeah. I think it's the better of the two tingle tree campsites, because there's tingles at the Giants campsite, but I think that's nicer there.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's nicer there. And so we didn't leave quite as early as you did, but we did leave. We did leave early. We did leave before first light because we were really keen to get into town. We had allowed ourselves 8 days, but we decided, let's push on, because a warm bed awaited us in Denmark as long as we finished. No, Denmark.
Oh, sorry.
My in-laws live in Denmark.
Yeah.
And if we pushed on, they were going to pick us up that day, and we could sleep in a proper bed.
Oh, very nice.
So, proper
People
bed.
always push to get into town.
Yeah, proper bed beats a lovely shelter, and I do think that Mount Clare is probably one of the best on the track. But sorry, a real bed beats it.
Yep. It's not in the best location because so many of the people who go through it will not stay there.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of huts like that.
But the Deep River bit I've done now 3 times since, 3 times including that time, because I've gone and explored the Noit's Wilderness area, which unfortunately has been burnt to a cinder, but has some outstanding coastal views off it. So that's something that's worth checking out if you're interested in something different. There used to be a campsite at Noit's Wilderness that people sometimes did as a side trip, but unfortunately it's now completely burnt and is not very inviting.
Well, all looks the same in the dark.
Yeah, true. So for you it would have been much the same. But the views on the Noit's Wilderness at the end of there's just these waves just crashing into the granite is outstanding. But I really think that the walking near Mount Clare is really nice. Like it's just that really nice thing of when you're in that open plains and the dunes to get to Karri Forest. I think it always is that welcoming. I don't know, like it's just something really lovely about it, and especially because there are the tingles up there as well. It's really lovely.
It's a day of contrasts.
It definitely is.
Yeah. The coastal scrub has such a different feel about it to the Tingle forests. It's like you go from being very exposed to being very ensconced in this very thick forest. And the animals are very different. Spiders love the coast. You don't see quite as many of them when you get to the higher elevations with the trees. Kangaroos tend to hang out more on the sand dunes, and as do the snakes. Whereas you see more birds and kookaburras and things like that once you get to the forest. It's great. Even in the dark I could feel it.
I mean, from Deep River, because this is now one of the sections I can actually talk about.
Yeah.
It is quite a steep ascent to Mount Clare. I've gone down it, I haven't gone up it. What was that like compared to some of the other climbs of this section?
It's a push, like it is quite steep. It's especially, if you've been spoiled by how flat the Pingra blades are, and then you've got the steep ascent, it's quite a change.
I recommend doing it before sunrise when it's nice and cool. I took it very slow. I was very conscious that my body was still weak at that point. I didn't want to push my heart or anything, so I was taking it very slow and taking lots of breaks. Even in the dark.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to enjoy around there as well. There's like nice grassed areas in between like mossy forests, and it was kind of really overgrown, but not in a bad way. It felt really enclosed. That's probably the best word for it, that forest.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it in summer, so I'm imagining in autumn it would be even better when it was cooler conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And the summits, I mean, the side track to the summit's a bit of a non-event.
Yeah,
it's worth doing.
I did it.
I was wondering, if
Yeah.
in winter it's better, or if it's a clear day it's better. But you kind of get to the summit of Mount Clare, and you're like, well, "What am I meant to be looking at?"
There's just
here?
trees everywhere.
Yeah. You get a better view from the John Raitt lookout, which is a little bit further down on
Agree.
the way into Walpole.
Yeah.
You see the Nornalup Inlet, which is the bigger one. And the ocean.
And the Rates Tingle, named after
Rates
John
Tingle,
Raitt.
named
Yes.
after a very unfortunate forester named John Raitt,
Yep.
who was killed by the trees that he discovered.
There you go. But yeah, as you said before, Ben, walking from Mount Clare down into Walpole, all downhill, so plenty to enjoy from this section.
Yeah, that was the point at which, after having gone through the drama of the previous 24 hours, I felt like you're out of the woods. Not literally, obviously still very much in the woods. But, I was going just a nice, easy stroll, slow gradient down into town. You can see the Nornalup Inlet from the Raitt lookout, which is a few k's after the hut. And then eventually you start to encounter more signs of civilization. You pass the highway, you see cars, and then you end up on the edge of the Walpole Country Club golf course, and you have to walk through the golf course for a bit.
Yeah.
At the time, they were doing a big burn-off of rubbish, so my welcome to Walpole was a giant pile of flaming rubbish, which was interesting, but it was... having come from a week in the wilderness, I was just so excited to see civilization.
I actually quite liked that section with all the paper barks there, because we didn't have rubbish burning while we went through. But it was really nice seeing all the paper barks and the boardwalk through the swamp. It was nice.
Yeah, and you cross a bridge over the what's the river? Is it the Deep River again? No, it's not. It's something else.
I think it might just be the Walpole River.
Yeah, it might just be a bit of the inlet.
But it's
I'm
like
not
quite
sure.
a curved bridge.
Yeah, there's a very
Yeah.
steep cut, almost like one of those Korean moon bridges.
Yeah.
And nice spot to take a photo, and you feel like you're in town again. The path starts getting paved. You start seeing joggers.
And houses.
But then, as always, it takes too long before you actually get to the center of town. You always feel like it's around the next corner. You're like, I'm going to go around this corner, and there's going to be a bakery. It's going to be right there.
And there is a bakery.
Eventually, and it's great. And I felt very relieved to get into Walpole. I felt absolutely shattered after that experience. And I checked into the YHA. I remember the guy who was behind the desk said, "Oh, have you just come from Mount Clare?" And I went, "No, I came from Long Point this morning." And he was like, "Jesus."
I don't know
which
why.
is a long way to go, considering I arrived at like 10 a.m.
Yeah. There is this attitude of like, because in the books they say, "Oh, it's worth breaking it up because it's quite hard," but I think it actually was quite an achievable 20.
It was very much. But to get there at 10 a.m, I think is surprising.
Yeah.
But it ironically, or maybe not, I scrubbed myself up, had a bunch of food, and then the next day, which I know we're not going to cover, but was probably one of my best on the track, where I felt the strongest and I felt like I'd completely recovered. So obviously no lasting damage done there, and it's one of the reasons why I think you should never quit the track on a bad day. You should always take a day off, wait and see how you feel after you've sorted yourself out, and then if you want to quit, then quit. But that was one of those examples where I don't think I ever really considered quitting there, but maybe if I had horrible blisters or I had one more thing, I would have. But the next day was amazing after having recovered. So hang in there.
Yeah. Maybe you accidentally ingested a heap of spiders and got a lot of protein that
Yep.
day.
Could have helped. I don't know. No, I had a 450-gram steak. That helped.
Yeah, that always helps.
I had a 10 on a
10
plate
on a
at the
plate. I
end.
was just
Yeah,
about to
yeah.
ask you.
Yep, 10 on a
Do
plate.
you remember what kind of 10 on a plate?
No, I think it was like probably like a steak and mushroom or a curry pie and a sausage roll. Yep,
No.
good.
Alright, yeah. All right, we'll finish there because it has been one of our longer podcasts, which I know we've trying to been cutting them down, but it's been all right. So we'll get some final thoughts about Walpole as a track town. We'll start with you, Ben.
Definitely a better track town than Northcliffe. It's a tourist town. It's got quite a few different things going on. It's got, I think, 2 little supermarkets. It's got a bakery. It's got a proper restaurant called the Top Deck Cafe, which does a great steak. The inlet is quite beautiful. You could even spend a couple of days in Walpole, rent a boat, rent a little tinny or something, and go explore the inlet. I've spent weekends in Walpole on houseboat, which is a lot of fun. It's got everything you need. You can organise your resupply there. You don't need to mail stuff to Walpole unless you've got really specific dietary restrictions. And if you want to take 2 zeros in a row or something like that, that's one of the towns where you can do it.
Yeah, I concur with a lot of what Ben said. I really enjoy the town. I think it's a very good track town. Last year, it was probably the place in Western Australia I've spent the most time in terms of repeat visits. So we did the Noit's Wilderness track there. We did some day walking around there, and Mark and I have talked about doing some kayaking around there as well. A lot to see in Walpole Noonalap. I think it's a great national park area.
Several accommodation options. You've got the youth hostel. There's a lodge, which is a bit more expensive. There's a caravan park out at Rest Point, which is a bit of a trek, but you think you can camp there. Is there anything else?
Well,
Maybe one more place.
there is, one of the things I'll say, so the pies in town are okay. However, if you have a vehicle, there's like an old bead shop on the side, but it's now become a bakery. And just east of Noonalap, and the pies there are outstanding. So they do a Jarrah smoked brisket pie.
Ooh.
And I hate burnt Jarrah, but good God, it tastes good. And all their pies are great, so I really recommend that if you're driving, especially if you're someone doing like if you're touring or something. It's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, and we'll finish. Where does Northcliffe to Walpole rate in the entire track for you guys?
Near the bottom.
Near the bottom for Don. Ben?
Oh, geez, this is a tough one. I'd say near the middle, because it's definitely got some of my favourite and least favourite parts of the track all in it. As I said, wool bales, sitting on that rock watching the stars was probably my highlight of the whole track. The roads are quite boring, I agree with you, Donovan. Maybe I'm not quite as vociferous as you. But yeah, they're not great. I would say in the middle. I prefer it over the bits around Collie,
Yeah,
which
okay.
I'm really not a fan of.
So Collie to Bailing Up would be...
Yeah,
I think worse.
Collie
So
to
I
Bailing
think-
Up is probably my...
So I think the walking here is worse, but
Yep.
the campsites are great, so that kind of maybe balances it out slightly.
I would put it above Collie to Bailing Up. I'd also put it above Denmark to Albany, which I really didn't rate that much. But the best spot, Walpole to Denmark, is my top.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I agree.
short answer, in the middle.
And down the bottom for Don.
Yeah, there's just so much opportunity there. It's the part I think emotionally, it cut more than Collie to Bailing Up because I already felt this way about the track. But it was the point where I went, I'm not gonna drink the Kool-Aid of this being a world-class track. This is the part where I went, no, this is not a world-class track. So it hurt more because the Bibbleman meant so much to me, and to no longer love it as much as I did, it hurt more.
Is this like the honeymoon phase is over and you start to see like the real flaws?
This is the part where not only that, I was just like stabbed. Like I was.
And she took all your money.
Yeah, exactly.
And yet you still chased her to the end.
Well, this is something I'd set as a goal, so I was going to finish it regardless of how much I hated this section and some other sections.
But if you're listening to this and you're trying to pick a section to hike, I would say don't do this as your first one. Do Walpole to Denmark. That's one of the most stunning. Or Bailing Up to Pemberton or something like that.
Yeah, Walpole to Denmark to me is outstanding. And as you say, Bailing Up to Pemberton, that's my 2 favourite sections.
Yep.
Okay, well, on that note, thanks, guys. And thank you, Ben, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
We wish you a very happy PCT experience, which you're off in a couple of months to do.
I am, less than 2 months. I'll be updating my blog, going solo blog, and maybe I'll come back on when I'm back and tell you all about it.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Excellent. So give Ben's blog a follow, and guess that's it.
So if you had any questions or any suggestions for future pods, please email us at realtrailtalk@gmail.com. And if you're enjoying this pod, then give us a like and a rating on iTunes or whatever platform you're listening to us on. Thank you, everyone, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.